Institute of Economic Affairs as a program officer for the Futures and Foresights program. For those who are joining us, sorry about that. So for those who are joining us today for the first time, we welcome you to the Institute of Economic Affairs. The Institute is we're a public policy think tank. We are based in Nairobi, Kenya. And what we do is we carry out research and use our research findings to have conversations on different topical issues, such as the one we are having this morning. So this one has not been researched. We just want to have a conversation around things that have been happening within our education sector. So that's an overview of who we are at the Institute of Economic Affairs. So this morning, we want to have a very interesting conversation around the school unrest that we have been witnessing over the past few weeks. And we want to have a different conversation where we are moving from blaming each other. We are moving from wanting to dissect who is the cause and moving towards what can we actually do to prevent the unrest that we've been witnessing in our schools. So, I mean, it's not news to most of us what we've seen happening in our schools the past few weeks. So, as a nation, we've been confronted with a reality that is deeply troubling. We have witnessed a wave of school unrest across the country, and this unrest has been marked by fires, destruction of property, disruption of learning, and the most tragic of all of this has been the loss of young lives. And may those beautiful souls rest in peace. So we saw the recent fire at Utumishi Girls Academy in Gilgil, very heartbreaking for the whole country, whether you're a parent, whether you're just a stakeholder within the education sector. That was the most heartbreaking thing we could have witnessed in this country this year. And it's not an isolated case. It's not the first time we are seeing our children burn to death in our schools. It's one of the many cases we have witnessed in this country. And we saw 16 lives, 16 students actually die because of that fire. So we know that since the beginning of the year as well, we've seen dozens of school fire incidents that have broken out and have been reported. And this underscores why this conversation is important. It's not an isolated tragedy, but for me, as somebody who's been following what's happening within our education sector, I think it's a worrying national pattern. And this conversation must be heard if we are supposed to get to a point of understanding what really is happening within our schools. So as we continue to mourn the lives that were lost, as we continue to wonder what is going on, and as we continue to stand with in solidarity with the families and the communities, we must bring ourselves to ask the difficult questions. And one of the difficult questions we want to have today is, how did we get there? How did we get to the level of unrest we are witnessing in our schools? And most importantly, as we ask ourselves, how did we get to this level? We have to also have a conversation on how do we ensure that we do not get ourselves to witness such again. And more often than not, when we experience unrest, when school unrest occurs, the national conversation quickly spans into assigning blames. So we start from blaming students for indiscipline, we blame principals for poor leadership. We find ourselves questioning whether the teachers are actually maintaining the order they're supposed to be maintaining. And of course, the parents are not left out of the blame. The parents are also blamed for neglect. and the children, our learners, we find ourselves bringing elements of social media, the changing societal values. And so while we are doing this, we are really not holding ourselves to accountability. Okay. So accountability is a very important part of this. But as we want to bring ourselves to accountability, we have to bring ourselves to also understand that with all the blame game going on, it will not prevent the next incident. The next incident will be prevented by having very candid and sober conversations, such as the one we want to have today. So, the theme for our webinar today, the conversation we are having today, for me, I think it's both timely and it's important. Maybe people would think, why are we having it today, weeks later? The dust has settled. We are now calm, and I think we are now sober enough to have a conversation. And we are having a conversation that beyond the blame let us challenge ourselves to shift our focus from reacting to the crisis which we have experienced to now how do we prevent. So as we have this conversation, I want to invite all of you to look beyond the immediate for lack of a better word, let's look beyond the immediate acts of distraction, and let's just critically examine the conditions that have allowed for these things to happen. What are these frustrations? What are these conflicts? And what brings this level of disengagement that then allows for things to escalate into the unrest? And just looking at a little bit of that data, forgetting packing aside the unrest we've experienced the last few weeks, if you look at the government report 2025 on the state of national security, the government of Kenya recorded 230 incidents of school unrest. That is in 2025, 230. Okay, that's almost one unrest incident every day of the year for the number of days our learners are in school. And out of the 230, 139 of those were actually school fires, and 105 cases of arson. So if you look at this, I mean, as a parent, as a stakeholder, these numbers are very high. And these incidences, as I already mentioned, we have disrupted learning, destroyed school infrastructure. And if you look at the number of the amount of money that even goes into reestablishing these institutions, those monies can be used for something else. So if we are to track the unrest that we are witnessing, it doesn't really begin with a fire or an act of vandalism. It begins from something much earlier. It begins from an unresolved grievance, a weak communication, an inadequate support system, all those things, and culminating to learners feeling unheard. So if we are to prevent future incidents, we must really pay attention to these early warning signs, because they're there. They're there. And Dr. Manyasa, who is going to be speaking to us about this topic today, will be speaking to us about some of these early warning signs and what they actually mean for their learners. So um, as we are having this conversation, I think it's an opportunity for, number one, for us to listen, for us to learn, and for us to reflect together. We are not going to be asking who is responsible, but we are going to be asking what can we do together so that we are preventing and we are more alert to ensuring that our learners are actually safe. Because as a parent, you send your child to school and you cannot be waking up at 2 a.m. to news of unrest in your child's school, and you get there and your child has been burnt to death. So let's move from having blame games. Let's move to having a candid conversation around what can we do together as a country, together as people who have a collective responsibility to ensuring that our learners are actually safe in this learning institution. So Dr. Manyasa is the executive director of Usawa Agenda and a friend of the IEA as well. And we'll be having a conversation. We are not having a presentation, guys. We just want to have a conversation so that we can bring ourselves to understand what can we do together. Is it a policy question? What really needs to be done for us to have a safe environment for our learners? Is it structural? Do we need to change how our schools look? Just overall, what do we need to do? So we're not blaming anyone. We're just having a candid conversation. So Dr. Manyasa will speak to us, and then after that, you will be free to just engage, give your comments, give your views on what you think we can do as a country to better the environment for our learners. So Dr. Manyasa, karibu sana, you have about 15 minutes to just engage us and give us your views about the safety of our schools and what we need to do. Karibu Daktari. Thank you. Doc, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
And you could also just
Thank you.
turn on your camera. Thank you.
Thank you for my camera is on. Can you see me?
Yes, I can now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Winnie, for first inviting me, for organizing this event so we can be able to deliberate together on some of the issues. I think now one of the most pressing issue in our learning institutions, which is the issue of learner safety when they are in school. A lot of issues explain this, and the Kenyan public, as usual, are legitimately angry, but also in the anger, they are making many suggestions, some of which will not be able to resolve the challenges that we face. And I want we need to allow me to point out a few things, even though you said we shouldn't blame anyone, and I'm not going to blame anyone, but I just want to point out the gaps that are responsible for the challenges that we are facing right now in our schools. First and foremost, school unrest incidents are not new. They have been there before many of the people on this webinar were born, but they are increasing in number and increasing in intensity, and that is the concern that we must now all address. This continued acts of violence in schools should actually concern all of us and should call all of us to order to start to reflect and introspect on what we need to do. One of the gaps that exist in the schools right now, and which could explain the worsening situation, is that today the living conditions in schools are not the living conditions in schools when we were in school. They have deteriorated. The learners are congested in schools. We have incidents where children are piled together in dormitories, almost like sacks of potatoes. And that, first of all, causes the element of duress among the learners, which could cause violence, but also in the event of violence and in the event of a school fire, like the unfortunate case of Utumishi Academy recently, it puts every other child in that dormitory at risk because the chance of getting out safely is limited by the congestion that is always visible in the dormitories. So that is one. There is a lot of congestion in fewer schools, and the conditions under which, therefore, these children are living are deteriorating. That is one. There is a challenge that comes from the broader society of parents and teachers pushing children to get grade A. So that you find in a boarding school, children go to bed at 11 and they are woken up at 3. Those are no conditions that allow children the opportunity to be children, and therefore exposes them to the risk of violence. The third condition that we can be able to talk about is the fact that, and this also comes from the broader society, the fact that we have made education not to hold the promise for these young people that it held for us when we were going to school, and when the generation ahead of us especially was going to school. Some of them trekked long distances to go to school, and some of them endured maybe harsh conditions to be able to go to school because school held so much promise. There was almost guarantee that when you get out of school, a good job will be waiting for you. There were a few examples you could look at in the community of people who have gone to school, and the drive to make sure that you get that education was sufficient to make every young person to want to be in school. Today, because of the fact that we have not allowed education to continue to hold the same promise for these young people as it held for those of us who went to school earlier, and even more for those who went to school ahead of my generation, we have a lot of children in school who are wanting out. And some of those children will actually engage in acts of violence because they are seeking to be expelled from school. And previously, we have threatened children with expulsion from school as a punishment. And I'll speak to what I think is a solution in this case. When you threaten children with expulsion, the few children who actually want out of school see that as an opportunity, and they will cause damage and endanger the other children in school because they think that is their way out of school. The other thing that I think I need us to focus on as well is to accept that in some of the schools, the leadership is not doing its job. The leadership is not doing its job because either they're subjecting children to very difficult conditions, or in some cases, they're just incompetent, and that incompetence makes children start to imagine that they are wasting their time in school because they can see themselves hurdling through school like people put on a conveyor belt that will, after some time, eject them out of the system without having gained anything from being there. And they think they are wasting time. Some of them want to be out, therefore, prematurely, so that they can be allowed to do something else that they think will be more meaningful in their life. We have situations, and this is another different angle, of children who go to school and form cartels within the school. And I will speak to what I think is a solution to each one of these points I'm raising. Those children who find themselves in a group, because not every child has the level of social grounding that enables them to be strong enough to resist negative peer influence. So children get peer influenced, they form cartels in the school, and they become a cohort within the school that wants to live on their own terms in the school. They will resist, they will violate school rules, they will resist any form of discipline that they are given. They will not obey the structures of the school. And most of the time, they're the ones who end up causing problems in the school. Related to that is the fact that we now seem to blame a whole generation. When there is a school fire, and we saw, like in the unfortunate case of Utumishi Academy recently, It's just a small number of learners. And when this small number of learners cause problems in a school, we start to lampoon all the children. We have 10 million plus children in school. It is actually wrong for us to be saying this generation is indisciplined. These children are, I don't know what. We need to bring back caning. Why are we blaming in a school of 1,000 children? Why are we blaming every child when we have actually identified the culprits and they are less than 1% of the children? I think that that is the wrong remedy that we are providing. And in some cases, it actually inflames passions among the children. We have schools right now that were closed because a few learners banned a dormitory or banned a classroom. They were arrested, they are known, but every parent is being surcharged. So what have the children of these other parents who are being surcharged done? When you have actually identified the culprits, and you can see that they did not involve everyone else in their scheme. Why are we punishing every child? Why are we punishing parents of children who are disciplined, who have not done anything to deserve? First of all, they are unhappy. They have gone home prematurely. They have lost learning time because of a few others in the school who are not their responsibility. They have no obligation to be watching over these few who may burn the school. And now you are also punishing their parents by surcharging them. And some are even being told you not return to school until this money has been paid. You give such a children a grievance that will make them want to also cause damage because anyways, everyone will pay regardless of who does it. So I think that that is something that we need to consider. And finally, when I look at the issue of the cartel groups, most of the time, there are children who come from households where parents themselves show indiscipline. And those parents, some have had the audacity to come to schools and shout at teachers in front of the same children and threaten those teachers. And that makes such a children to feel that they cannot be touched by anybody and that the teachers should, because the parents have shown that the teachers are supposed to be subordinate to them, the children feel that those teachers should also be subordinate to those children, and they become uncontrollable in school. So what do I think needs to be done? Let me start with this final point. We have children that form cartels in school. And if the school leadership is strong and discerning, the school leadership should be capable of identifying those children who have come together, who are negatively influencing each other, and actually call the parents of the concerned children and transition them out of the school. Not transition them in the form of expulsion. I don't believe in expulsion at all because, first of all, basic education is a constitutional right. So expelling a child is a violation of that right. But secondly, as a society, when we expel children from school, where are we expelling them to? We are expelling them to society. They will become rogues and they will be everybody's problem. So we shouldn't expel them. We should transition them to different schools and break their cartel. I saw that happen in high school when I was a student. We had a group of 7 boys who were so bad together. When 6 of them were removed from that school and we remained with only one, he was the meekest person one could come across, never destructive. And some of the learners who joined the school after the others had been removed will never believe when they were told that that guy had been very bad in the school. So we can always, the school leadership can always speak with parents and tell parents it is not in your interest that your child stays in this school because in the end, he or she has joined another group of learners and their negative influence on each other. So we will transition them to different schools. That is one. Two, in the incidences that Winnie has mentioned here, 100 plus cases of arson, you can see in there the problem and why this problem recurs in the schools. Do we have people who are charged with those cases? People in charge, because that is a criminal act. The criminal justice system should take over. Some of the fires are not set by learners. When the fire is set by people from outside, the criminal justice system should actually take its course and fully and expeditiously so that we get everyone who was involved to serve as an example to others who could have been thinking of doing something similar, to know that there will be serious consequences if you did that. If the fires are set by children, and this is one fact we need to live with, that there are children who, no matter how much parents try, they will still not be as good as everyone wants them to be. They may not fit in our normal school system. For that reason, this country had a postal institutions system set up. We have what we used to call as approved schools. We need to expand those schools and transition children who are at risk of setting fires and burning others and burning other children's properties and destroying schools that have cost a lot of resources to develop into those postal institutions. I know people who went through approved schools who are today responsible members of society. Let us transition such a children there, not expelling them, but transitioning them there. And the school should have a system of being able to monitor how children are faring, being able to open the course for open dialogue. Open dialogue will help the school leadership to always speak up stressors that may explode into fires before they explode into fires and respond to them. I know that many principals have challenges as well because of the reason that the schools are overcrowded and the number of teachers in those schools is small. We need to decongest schools that are congested. Starting with, for instance, right away, and this can be done immediately. From the start of this year, all schools were reclassified into either day or day and boarding. We no longer have a fully boarding school. So the schools where we have so much congestion in the dormitories and they do not have resources to expand boarding facilities right away. Let us transition learners who come from the neighborhood to become day scholars like immediately so that there's no congestion in the dormitories. Because in any case, the official policy of government right now is that every school will have a day stream. Whether it is boarding or not, every school will have a day stream. So let us transition learners who come from around the school to be day scholars and decongest dormitories and make the numbers that board manageable for the school teachers and the school leaders there to be able to keep track of what the learners are doing, isolate those who may be bent towards causing distraction in the school, and transition them to pastoral institutions before they cause damage and before they ruin their own lives and endanger other children's lives. I think that that is critical. We have an issue of mismanagement of schools as well. We have school heads who are themselves supplying everything to school, and they are undersupplying and overpaying themselves so that the schools are barely meeting their needs. We have had cases of very genuine demonstrations of learners. They don't have water in school and they are expected to survive in school. I think that the current policy of saying once you have been appointed head teacher, you will always be head teacher should be relooked at. There are people who are very good teachers. They may progress well as teachers, but when they're given a managerial responsibility, they fail. What we have done in the past is you have a principal of a big school, they fail, you transfer them to a smaller school in the name of demotion. And that is just horrible on many levels. First level is, yes, if you are punishing this head teacher, what have the children in the small school done to deserve his or her failed leadership? You want to punish the principal by taking them to a smaller school. But what have the children in the smaller school done to deserve to be led by someone who has failed as a leader? I think that is very critical for us to look at and say, if someone fails to run a school, what happens to them? I have suggestions on that I don't want to talk about today because there will not be discussions meaningful in this line. I think that must be addressed. I talked about the issue of the congestion in the schools. We have the issue of the government failing to send resources to schools in time. And they have failed to send resources to school in time. And they have told schools, don't send away children. So schools are struggling to provide services to learners. And this distresses the children. If you're going to keep very many boys in school, and boys in their teenage are at the right time of development, physical development, and they're eating like portion meals, and you don't have money to even feed them, you are on the brink of causing unrest in the school. So let us resource the schools. And resourcing schools is not just entirely government thing, it's also parents. Parents, some of them follow the cheap talk by politicians who tell them don't pay any money to schools, when actually the same politicians know that government is not sending the money in full and on time, and they are failing to support school leadership to be able to provide services adequately and protect their children in school. And I think that needs to be done. We have the national security apparatus that are in charge of the regions where these schools are. When you hear that children are being sold drugs in schools, we have national security machinery that must collaborate with the heads of schools to ensure that that does not happen. So children are not exposed to drugs, which impair their judgment and make many of them make irrational decisions, including doing things that endanger their own lives, the lives of their colleagues in schools, and destroy property that cost a lot to rebuild, and therefore keep our country stuck. When we mention these 100, 200,000 fires, 2,200 fire, 200 schools burning in a year, all that is a lot of money that goes into reconstruction. All that money could go into building new labs that we dearly need right now. All that money could go into hiring new teachers that we really need in our schools. We are being held back by this. And so this is a national security issue that the security machinery in the areas where these schools operate need to up their ante and support the school communities in ensuring that schools are safe. Finally, I think it is important that we start to understand two important things that are beyond the school. One, we must stem the kind of talk I have had recently. When you have a lot of semi-literate individuals crookedly acquiring money and flaunting it, and telling people I didn't go to school, but the people went to school serve me. You're giving a very strong incentive to young people who are very impressionable in their minds that education means nothing. And so trying to implement compulsory basic education policy in circumstances where these children feel like being in school destines them to being servants of those who didn't go to school, makes them look at education as a prison. And some of them actually don't see the value. Yet we all know the value of education. We all know that countries are built on the quality of education, and countries can actually be destroyed on the poor quality of education or lack of it. So we need to tame that kind of talk. I do not have an answer on how we will tame that, but we must find a way to tame that kind of talk of illiterates, semi-literates being allowed to acquire monies that they don't know the sources, and then being given platforms to flaunt that and negatively influence young people who are supposed to be in school, who are supposed to be developing their capacities to take over the reins of the country and build onto what the current and previous generations have built until now. I think that that is one point that is beyond the school, that is a societal value. The second societal issue is the promotion of violence as a means to solving problems. We have seen grown-ups lighting bonfires on the road because that is the only way to express their frustration with anything. We have seen people killing their spouses as if they were chicken that you slaughter anytime you have a visitor. We are promoting a culture of violence that then these young people think is the right way to live. Resolve every problem with violence, because that is how adults seem to be resolving their problems. That needs to change, and it needs to change soon, so that these young people have role models of solutions that are non-violent and that they know you can always talk to other people and find a remedy to your problem. I think that that will help us to go a long way in ending the culture of violence in schools. Let us make our schools centers of excellence. If you look at most of these fires, and most of them come in second term, they come in second term because second term, one is the longest term. We have made boarding schools a black hole where parents are excluded. You are told you cannot visit your child anytime you are able to visit. The schools have, if you go to a school canteen, bread bar is sold at almost double the price of bread outside the school. Yeah. Why is that the case? Why does a school canteen sell bread for double the price of the same loaf of bread in the shop? Because you have held these children hostage and you are exploiting them. And that creates pressure on these children because, first of all, many of them don't get much pocket money. A few are lucky to have some pocket money, but they see it evaporate very fast because the school canteen sells things at prices that are not the normal price. So they are exploited and basically cheated out of the little money they may have gotten from home. And midway the term, they don't have a coin left. Some of them are struggling to eat a meal in the dining hall because of congestion. And they start to be edgy. And I think that we can resolve those small things and make schools a very conducive place for children to want to be and for children to see hope for their future in, and to therefore start to value their own time there, to start to see that they are building their futures and they are not just held hostage for the benefit of someone else. Let us make sure that we are not chasing grades. I taught in a university, I saw students come to university with mean grade A and fail exam and get discontinued before they finish their bachelor's. So when parents are colluding with teachers and saying, let them paying teachers extra money to teach at 6 at 4 a.m. so that these children can get A's. Guess for what? They're getting A's for what and for whom? For the school to be able to pride itself that we got a mean grade A, and for the parent to boast in the village about the son or daughter who got an A, when you are actually destroying the child, him or herself. I think let us shift that, and we'll be able to create lasting peace in our schools. I know there is a task force coming up. I think task forces in Kenya have become some sort of placebos administered to calm people down. But I don't think that the task force is going to be able to bring any new knowledge about what is causing problems in schools. Let us just follow the rules that we set. There are guidelines on how to run schools. If we enforced those guidelines and addressed these extra school issues that I have mentioned, I think we'll be able to restore sanity in schools and make schools a peaceful place, safe place for all our children, and a good place for us as a society to develop the young people that are obvious heirs of this country's future. Thank you. Winnie, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daktari. It's interesting to just hear you speak to us about what's happening within our schools and you giving some of the reasons you think it's happening the way it is. And you raised you mentioned a few things. You mentioned as remedies to what is already happening. And so you speak about decongestion. And the decongestion conversation is one that it's unfortunate that we are having it right now as a matter of crisis. When it was happening, the transition to grade 10, of course, came with congestion into our schools. And people raised issues around how that transition was being done and the state of our schools in terms of accommodating the new numbers for the grade 10s. So the decongestion conversation, I repeat, it's unfortunate we are having it as a matter of crisis, but it is something that has to be looked into. I do not think that the transitioning for the grade 10s was something that our government did really well. They did not consider so many factors, and you saw schools rushing to make makeshifts just to accommodate some of their grade 10s. And these makeshifts, the question we asked ourselves at that time was, were the standards being met for them to be habitable for our grade 10 learners? And you see, we are making reference and using Utumishi because that's the reality that we are living with right now. You saw what happened with Utumishi. We had learners from the videos that were circulating. You saw beds actually even on the corridors. So it means there is no even space. And that's just that space that we saw. So you can imagine if we were to go into Utumishi or any other school for that matter, to just see how our learners, the living environment for our learners, I think would be very surprised. So even as we're having this conversation, and I think that the congestion conversation is one that must be had. And then you also speak about the approved schools. And the intention of the approved schools, of course, was to have those learners or children who could not be accommodated within the normal environment pushed towards those approved schools. So I think it's about time that government looked, and you rightly say, into expanding those approved schools so that learners who cannot be accommodated within what we now I would want to call the normal learning systems would actually be transitioned into those ones. Because you look at what happened, for example, with Nyabisase, you see learners throwing stones at their teachers. And I don't know how to make sense of it or what to think about the teachers also picking stones. And so it's a fight within the school between the learners and the teachers. So once, and Doc, you rightly say, some of these learners are actually learners who are known. And if we were to look into the history of these learners, I wouldn't be surprised that um, even back at home, probably they're actually a problem. And that's also a reality that some of us parents run away from, that you really know that your child is a difficult child even in the house. But when that reality is presented to you at school, you want to be defensive about it. You then present a very difficult picture, and it's a very difficult conversation to have. So those are the realities. And then, of course, school management, again, some of the grievances that these learners are raising, to be honest, are very, very legit. We cannot sweep them under the carpet and say our learners are being difficult. If a learner is complaining about the food, for example, I mean, that is something that has to be looked into. You cannot expect, and you see, it's the eating habits for adolescents and those high schoolers is very, we experience it, parents. Let's not be, let's not try to pretend about it. You can imagine what happens when these learners come back home. Your portions all of a sudden are changing. So that there's that expectation of how they're supposed to be feeding. And even some of the foods that they are given, to be honest, even you as a parent, if you were to go there and sit, I do not think you would be in a position where you're comfortably eating those foods. But I mean, those are conversations that must be had. And then comes the issue of task forces, which our government does as a matter of if we form a task force, then we are having a solution for it. Guys, let us be let us get to ourselves to a point of realizing that a task force is not a solution, because we've seen a lot of task forces being formed in this country, and that's taxpayer money going into that task force. And even the recommendations that those task forces come up with, some of them are not even followed to the core. And some of those recommendations, to be honest, are not recommendations that you need a task force to come up with. There are recommendations that if you sit out with yourself and your ministry, for example, and have candid conversations, you will definitely come up with those recommendations. So let us not be a country that rushes into having these task forces in the name of coming up with solutions. Some of those solutions we can just come up with without necessarily coming up with this task force. So I think it's good that we are having these conversations as we are having it right now. And at this point, I will open up. If anybody has a comment or a question that they would want to engage with, you could use the hand raising bar. We will pick you. You will have an opportunity to give your comment and or raise your question as we continue the conversation. Remember, we're having a conversation, so anything you have to say about the school unrest, it's affecting all of us. So I believe at this point, if I was to give all the 30 of us in this meeting an opportunity, I believe all of us would be having something to say about the situation. So anybody who would want to give a comment or ask a question, this is the time to do that. Or you can type it in. Anyone with a question or with a comment? Or a view about the current happenings? Yeah. So I can see there's a question on the chat box, and Steve Gyre is asking, so Daktari, the issue of having day schools as a policy in all schools, why is it not being implemented yet? And then he also gives a comment. Parents also have a duty to ensure they inculcate discipline in their children and also be in good terms with them. That is the only way that such negativity can be arrested early enough. And I know this is pointed to Terry, but I tend to agree and points back to what I am saying, that some of us parents, you actually know your child is a difficult child, but when you're called upon to school for a conversation about your child, you become very defensive and you want to paint a picture of a very disciplined child back at home, when in reality, you know your child is a problem child. So, I mean, discipline has to start back at home. But I mean, Dr. I'll leave for you to also give your views as you respond to Steve's question. Karibu.
I don't know if we can take maybe 2 or 3 more so that we respond. They might end up being related.
Yes, Dr. we can. Anybody else with a question or a comment, so that Dr. can have the first round of the questions? No. Okay, Dr. you could just proceed with that, and then we'll see if anybody drops in something else on the chat box, or after you speak, if somebody would want to say something. Thank you.
Thank you. The issue of
Hi,
having
can I? Hello? Can I be heard?
Professor
Sorry.
Shiriaka, go ahead.
I don't know. I tried to join. Thank you very much for this conversation. But I would have wished to hear a little bit more about the existing policy guidelines that are in existence, and if there is any works that are being done around it. Because we talked about over 200 documented incidents. I would also want to hear a little bit about the actual numbers, Dr. Reeve. How many are they, and how can that data be accessed, and what are the specific policies that speak around the issues that you have so very well articulated in your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. So let me start with Jairo's question around not implementing the policy on all schools having day stream. That is a policy that came into effect this year. As usual, some of the big schools are resisting it because they don't want, they are saying it will be difficult for them to implement, that it will be, it will make maintaining discipline in school difficult because they are coming from the mold of discipline is control. And that is one of the problems that we face in the way we run schools. We do not seem to appreciate that we can have discipline in an environment of freedom. We seem to think that discipline only comes with tight control. And because our model is one of tight control, and the circumstances within which children learn today and the society lives today is such that it is much harder to control people. So some of the young people are engaging school managers in who is smarter now games about control. I think we need, and Professor Shiriaka, you are here, you are a teacher educator, you need to start educating teachers to understand that discipline does not necessarily equal control. Actually, the only way you know when a child is disciplined is when you can give them freedom and they still operate responsibly within that freedom. Which goes to the point of parents having to be responsible for their children. A lot of parents believe they're responsible, and a lot of them are exercising too much control at home. And because they exercise too much control at home, they rightly come to school and defend their children when they're told your child has done this, because they actually don't know their children. Their children wear two different persona. When they're at home within the strict environment of control, they are different people. And when they are at school within an environment where they can be swayed by some of their friends, they are totally different people. So a parent doesn't know their child, and they come to school and defend the child, yet the child has a different personality at home and a different personality at school. And I think that is an important issue, which is why I want schools to be opened to parents, to be accessible, so that parents can engage regularly with teachers about their children when there is no crisis. What happens today that parents are only called to school to be asked for money or to be told that your son or daughter has been involved in this incident of indiscipline. Parents are not engaging with teachers to the level where both the parent and the teacher have the same knowledge of who the child is. And that is very critical for maintaining discipline in schools. When the parent and the teacher speak the same language about the child. As it is now, it is not the case. Do we have policies around this? Yes, we have. For instance, we have school safety guidelines, which require, for instance, that you cannot have a triple-decker bed in the dorm, which require beds to be spaced 1.2 meters from each other. You will never find that in like 95% of our schools, which require that dormitory doors are 5 feet wide and they open outward, and there are 2 doors per dorm, plus an extra emergency exit. Today, the ministry is still approving construction of dormitories that don't meet those guidelines. They are still being approved and they don't meet the guidelines. So how that is happening is a gap that needs to be addressed within the Ministry of Education structures and Ministry of Public Works structures as well, because Public Works is involved in approval of those dormitories. And I think that is important. We have the policy about visiting children in schools, and there is a clause within the guidelines that says strangers are not allowed in the dormitories. From the face of it, it is a good clause because it protects learners from intruders. However, schools have also used that to bar parents from seeing the kind of conditions their children live in. So you go to schools and you're told the policy says you cannot visit dormitories. No, I think that is not correct because parents are not strangers. And especially when they are in school on a visit that they have been invited, a group of them, and they're being taken around the school, they are with the school principal. Why shouldn't they access the dormitories in the company of the school principal? They are not going to be able to commit any mischief in there. They're just being barred from accessing the school. The issue of congestion of learners in schools. The grade 10 placement was a fiasco. And it allowed some schools, those that were perceived to have good names and parents trust they can make their children pass, to admit way beyond their capacity, while we have more than 1,000 schools that did not get a single grade 10 learner. Which goes back to the question that we have been raising for a long time. Can we invest in making our schools capable of offering all learners equal opportunity so that parents do not scramble for a few schools and leave a lot of schools underutilized while exposing the children to high risks associated with congestion in the few schools where every parent believes that is where children learn. So I think that is a bigger investment issue. Government can actually utilize the placement of the next grade 10 as a window to remedy this mess by making sure a school that admitted bigger numbers than they can handle receives much fewer learners and enforcing that. Because what has been happening is that initially they will assign learners to schools, but there is no way to enforce that, and learners vacate most of the schools and congregate in a few schools. We have enough schools to accommodate our secondary school learners, but they are congested in a few schools. And that's why I said, for the immediate term, we can make those schools that have too many learners congested in the dormitories decongest them by enforcing the day stream guidance that was issued early this year. And then in next year's allocation of grade 10, make sure that you balance out. We get more learners to schools with fewer learners, and we get fewer learners into the schools that already have too many. But also equalize facilities across the schools. There is a policy on guiding and counseling that has not been resourced. We need to resource the policy on guiding and counseling so that schools have someone qualified and competent to be a counselor. At the moment, it is teachers who stand in as guiding and counseling masters and mistresses, but they also have a full teaching load. And therefore, they don't really have time to talk to learners who may be stressed, who may be experiencing other problems that may cause them to explode. We've had cases of learner suicides. We've had cases of learners bullying other learners, which is just a projection of problems they are facing individually. With resourcing of the policy on guiding and counseling, we can be able to address some of those problems before they become a fire. Back to you, and if there are more questions and comments, maybe from the chat, you can raise them. And Professor, I wish to engage with you separately on some of the issues you've raised. I think we will be able to pick this up.
All right. So Kibet, Edwin Kibet gives a comment. From the discussion, we can say that overteaching does not equate to overlearning. And then Toscan Rabin says, so does the National Parents Association or school sponsors or the Parents Teachers Association have a role in coming up with solutions? At the risk of inviting the police in learning environments, is there room for National Intelligence Service to look into community interference and incitement? And then Faustin Wandera, child safeguarding policy, personal safety and security policy needs to be taken seriously as well if they exist within the schools. And I think Daktari has touched a bit into those policies. And then Kedogo Jairas is asking, on fixing the gaps, particularly on the promise of education, what would be your recommendations on how to restore the promise of education to both high performers and the average students? So I think that, Terry, this links to you speaking about the notion that there are certain, the notion of those who've not gone through a school and education presenting themselves as high achievers and giving the wrong picture to the learners. I think that links. And then Noor is asking, how can communities, teachers, and parents work together to curb the school unrest? And finally, Wilson gives a comment on the need to strengthen the role of Boston colleges in Kenya. That's Dr. Wangigi, and that is in line with what part of your recommendation on expanding our approved schools. So, Dr. you could take a go on those, and then we'll see if we'll have another round of questions, Karibu.
Thank you. So, yes, mostly there are comments, and I appreciate the comments. I'll go to the issue raised by Robin on the role of Parents Association and the role of national intelligence. I think that the country knows how to maintain security. I don't want to advise them. However, schools must not be left to be dark holes where no one knows what goes on in there. So the national intelligence has jurisdiction, I know for sure, to be able to tell and advise those who who have authority over schools, whether there is a simmering tension between the school and the community, so that the community may be interfering in the school and inciting children to violence, whether there is mismanagement of the school, so that whoever is mismanaging the school, whether it's the school head or the BOM leadership, are removed before they drive the school into a mess, or whether there are children within the school who are plotting violence for whatever reasons, so that the schools can be safe for all the other children and the school community. I think that is important. The national intelligence obviously has jurisdiction, and maybe they just need to act much more. In the past, I think the responsibility of what goes on in the school has been left to the school head, and many times that may have been overwhelming, as we have seen in the many incidents that happened. There are also talks out there which are not verified and which I cannot say I know for sure. But there are also talks out there that some of the fires are actually lit by people hired by crooked school heads who want an opportunity to exploit parents. So that there is a fire today, and the next thing, every parent is being asked for so much money, which is way more than the damage that was caused, and a lot of that money gets lost because it goes into a special account. It's not money for this for school fees, and it's not audited. So I think that is an important role of security agencies to be able to preempt. But I also think that if parents had a sufficient voice in schools, that they will be able to contribute constructively in preempting some of these incidents and actually helping to improve schools as a safe place for children. But parents, majority of them, do not have sufficient voice. The thing we have currently as PTA is in many ways a charade. The PTA members are handpicked, and if you have a principal who is not interested in running the school well, they will still mismanage the school despite there being a PTA. And I think that is an area of great weakness that needs to be addressed. I think that in many cases, schools which have been set up by the community have wind up being in conflict with the community because the way the policy of government operates is that communities are then seen as a threat to the schools, and they are excluded from participation. And many parents start to see the school as this strange intruder in their communities, and they start to lose interest, sometimes even become antagonistic to the schools. We also have communities that are maybe taken hostage by some very, very, I don't know how to describe them, but very peculiar interests, where you find a school is a public school, is in a certain community, and people are telling you, oh, we can only accept a member of our clan to be the head in this school. Otherwise, we will not. And that becomes a big problem. And I feel that in those circumstances, we have failed the principals who find themselves in those schools by not giving them the level of support they need to be able to run a school successfully in an environment that is fraught with that kind of negative community level politics. I think that is important. Without forgetting, we have had incidents where elected leaders have meddled in management of schools because they want to give school principals bursaries and collect part of the bursary through the back door. And the principal does not want to play ball. They start to undermine the leadership of the school. And I think that needs to change. so that school managers are given responsibility, but they are also given the support they require from government, from the community, and shielded against any outrageous maneuvers that may undermine their responsibility to the learners. Because if you are a school principal, your first responsibility is to the learners. Those are the people whose futures are in your hands. That is your first responsibility. And then you can be responsible to the ministry and to the community. But first and foremost, responsibilities of school heads are to the learners. And they should be shielded against anything that will impair their ability to deliver on that obligation of shaping futures of young children. Is there anything I've not responded to? Okay.
No, you've done well. So, Dr. Bengat Kipyagon gives a comment and says, I think we totally lack a discipline culture, which spills over to schools. Outside we have bred violence, and students are good learners learners of the same. That's just a comment. And then Siriaka Gitonga, you could unmute yourself and give your comment or ask a question.
Yeah, well, I think having listened to the responses that Emmanuel has given, and even the comments that are coming from participants, I'm just curious about leveraging on the presence of universities in these spaces. My university is just directly opposite Kangaroo Girls. And in the wave of the fires, when that wave of violence was going around after Utumishi, Kangaroo Girls also went out. And then a few days later, I think also Kangaroo Boys. And we are just directly opposite. So I don't know, Emmanuel and the team that has engaged in these conversations more boldly than the universities. What can we do? I'm here with some of my colleagues who are asking the same questions. I think 4 of us have joined and from different disciplines. Wilson is a lawyer. We have the School of Law. We have somebody from the School of Business. We have somebody from ICT. And we really would want to be in these conversations because I think we can make a contribution in whichever way. I only am shy to say that maybe the reason why we are not getting fires in the universities is because we are not accommodating students. Because students live outside the universities, they don't have an institution to vent. I don't know. I'm just thinking. But I think universities we are available. What we are lacking possibly is the leadership on the conversations, and would be very happy to have this to join these conversations when they are there, and looking at the themes that are emerging from what we have raised. I think the government issue, leadership issue, early intervention, legal accountability, community engagement, policy review, and preventative focuses. I think these are issues around which universities can come together and support strengthen the voices. So we have a one voice from research perspective and from your area, Emmanuel. And I'm glad to have joined. And I'm happy that you mentioned that there will be this conversation. Otherwise, it would have just passed us. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Let me quickly mention something that you have raised and which goes to the question that I was asked earlier, and sorry I had not responded to it, which was how do we make sure that education continues to provide the promise that will keep young people working hard to acquire it. One of the avenues is actually through universities. There has been something that has been going on that I think we need to address. This issue of we are telling every young person there's no need to go to university. You need to go to TVET because that is where the jobs are. That is the message we are communicating out here. In the school is making children sleep maximum of 3 hours because they must qualify for university. And that creates dissonance in the minds of these young people. Because when universities are doing well, they have very strong signaling effect on learners at all the other levels below them. And that keeps the young people focused on doing well in school and on applying all their time on excelling in their studies rather than on looking on the sides, wondering whether what they are doing in school is the right thing or not, and doubting the value of the sacrifices they are making at school. I think that we need to address that conversation. We need to tell these young people that education is an equal opportunity for people to show how unequal they are. So that by the time they leave school, the differences between them should be reflecting difference in their abilities and difference in their effort. And most of the time is just should be different in the effort that they have made. And not a situation where one is in a school where no matter how much effort they make, they are not going to meet certain, they are not going to achieve certain level of qualifications, while others are in a place where they are put in a pressure cooker and told, we will only switch off the pressure cooker once you meet the threshold that we want out of you, regardless of whether it aligns with their own vision of what their future should be. And I think that that is important. But beyond that, I think that all over the world, universities provide leadership in all sectors, whether it is research, whether it is industry, whether it is politics, it is universities, whether it is health. Actually, in most countries, when their president is sick, they are treated in a university hospital because that is where the best medical care can be found. We have, in many ways, undermined the leadership role of our universities by underfunding, by under-resourcing them. We have undermined that role. And undermining the role, the leadership role of our universities spills back into community through very many failed systems. It is not just education, it will be many other systems that will fail. Political systems will fail, health systems will fail, economic systems will fail when we undermine the role of the university. So I am happy that you raised this, and I throw a challenge back to you, Prof, and your colleagues, that there is a lack of university leadership in our society in all the sectors, and universities need to reclaim that role. And that's why I said we can have a conversation on this separately, and I am happy to have a conversation on this separately. That universities reclaim their leadership role in our society. That will restore many of the other systems that are currently failing. Thank you. And back to you, Winnie.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for responding to the questions and even the comments that we have received out of today's conversation. And Faustin Wadera still gives a comment. There is also need to reduce social detachment between administration and students and parents. A whistleblowing policy can also be introduced in schools. So I think we've had a good conversation just off the engagement we've had between the speaker and you, our listeners, and we appreciate the fact that you actually made time. So I will be giving Dr. Manyasa 1 minute just to give his concluding remarks, and then we will close this. Dr.
Thank you, Winnie, for having me, and thank you everyone who joined. This conversation has only started, it's not ending. I am open for further discussion, and my colleagues are on this call as well. We are, as Usawa Agenda, available for conversation. We are currently working on a secondary school survey report that we'll be releasing later this month. We will communicate the date. It is going to highlight many of the issues that you have noticed that I wasn't keen on giving numbers because we have all the numbers from the 2024 report, but we have new numbers that we are working on right now, which I did not want to preempt, which we will share when we release the report, and we will be able to share both the report and the data behind it for especially those in the universities who will want to do deeper analysis. That data will be available. So look out for the invitation to the launch of the third senior school survey report. It will bring up a lot of information. But in between, we are open for further conversations. Thank you, Winnie. Thank you, IEA, for organizing this event. We're really grateful.
Thank you, Dr. And I mean, Dr. we appreciate the fact that you've always accepted to be part of these conversations anytime the IEA has reached out to you. It's something that we do not take for granted. Your expertise in the area of education is much appreciated, and the work you do in just data generation and reaching out to the public on education policy dialogues is much appreciated, and we appreciate you for making time to join us. And to our listeners, we really are grateful for you and for making time to be part of today's conversation. And like Dr. has said, this is just the beginning of these conversations. We will continue having these conversations up until the point where we can proudly say that the school unrest issue has actually been addressed and we are not experiencing any more unrest in our schools. So let's keep having these conversations. And I'm glad that the universities, the stakeholders within the universities are also asking for what their role could be in this whole conversation. So it's unrest within our secondary schools, but just the fact that our universities are also now taking it upon themselves and asking themselves that, well, how do we as universities also come in and be part of this unrest conversation and making it better for our learners. So just to remind you, the Institute of Economic Affairs is a membership organization. And if you'd want to join us as a member, please feel free to reach out to our communications team, Oscar and Michelle, and they will be very glad to walk you through what you need to be part of the IEA community. So please feel free to reach out to them and look out for more of these conversations from the IEA. We keep having different conversations on different topical issues. So please just be on the lookout on our social media pages, on our website, and you will be part of the upcoming conversations. That said, asanteni sana for making time to join today's conversation, and it doesn't stop here. Let's keep having these conversations until we get to a point where we are satisfied that the unrest has been handled. So for those who would want to keep having these conversations on the side, please reach out to the IEA through our email. You could reach out to Usawa Agenda, and should we continue the conversation with Usawa Agenda and probably decide to come up with a memo or a policy paper, we will also be very glad to give you that information, and it will be up and uploaded. It's a conversation we'll continue to having together with Usawa Agenda. That said, do enjoy the rest of your day and have a blessed morning. Asanteni sana. Thank you.
Thank you. Asante kila mtu, shukrani kubwa na siku njema.